Today, I would like to welcome the members of the forum at the head table. And to the extreme right is Mr. Rennie Dumas, who is the education officer for the People's National Movement. To his left is Mr. Orville London, who is the Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly. And next to him is Mr. Hochoy Charles of the Platform of Truth. And to my right is Mr. Alan Richards, who is going to bring you the report of the commission. There's a document that was handed out to you, and this was a commission that was formed, and they were appointed to examine the proposed legislative offerings of the conformity with the wishes of the people of Tobago. So Mr. Richards is going to bring a report on that commission. However, I would not delay and ask the Honorable Chief Secretary, Mr. Orville London, to bring his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guy, and give the opportunity to recognize brothers and sisters from Tobago and from Trinidad. I think I need to share with you why I am here, why we are here, and what we are hoping to achieve. And you know, like sadly, I realize that I am here in maybe 4 capacities: as Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly, as a member of a political party, as a resident of Tobago, and as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. And all of those hats are in fact relevant in this process. Because what we're in fact doing is that we are entering into a very critical phase in a 4-decade journey, where those of us who have traveled that journey have seen that the objectives have not been achieved. And if one looks at the last 2 years, one would understand why this process is necessary and why we have to do things right this time around. Because you have had a document which would have dated back to 1976 with the motion that was moved by the Honorable Arthur N. Robinson. And since then, there have been various attempts made to ensure that the kind of objectives which would have been postulated by Mr. Robinson, that those objectives were achieved. We have failed. We have made some progress, but in reality we have failed. And therefore, there was a need for some serious introspection on behalf of all of us as to why it is, even if the impression is given by all the decision makers that they want self-government for Tobago, self-government for Tobago has not been achieved. And I don't think it was any more evident than just before the 2013 Tobago House of Assembly election, when every political party had as its major plan internal self-government for Tobago. In fact, we reached the point where 1 week before the election, there was supposed to be a debate in Parliament. We know what happened. That debate never took place. After that, the issue was shelved. And therefore, the challenge that we had, how do you revitalize the issue of self-government for Tobago in a manner where, by looking at the mistakes that we have made in the past, and that by doing the necessary introspection, we give ourselves a better chance of success. And it is in that context, I want to pay public tribute to Mr. Charles, who came to me and indicated to me that we've got to work together. And in that discussion, it was agreed that one of the major challenges we had was the issue of what you might call political polarization. That the issue of self-government for Tobago became a political issue. It became a political football. It became an issue for people to make political mileage. And therefore, even though some people wanted it to happen, or everybody wanted it to happen, nobody wanted it to happen to anybody else. And therefore, the best way to treat with it is that all of us will go to the people of Tobago, the political parties and the Tobago House of Assembly, and go to the people of the country so that we signal to them that we as decision makers have concluded, as we should, that this is something that has to transcend political self-interest, and therefore together we must work together to ensure that Tobago gets what Tobago has deserved and what Tobago has demanded over the years. And as was said in one of our meetings, we will work together to get Tobago what Tobago wants and deserves. And at the end of the day, we might fight each other to see who controls it. But at this point in time, we must work together. And it is in that context that I, as Chief Secretary, would have called together the leaders of the People's National Movement, the Platform of Truth, and the Tobago Organization of the People. And I will tell you that one of the most gratifying moments in my 13 years as Chief Secretary was when we sat at Mount Irving. Mr. Charles from the Platform of Truth, Mr. Jack from the Tobago Organization of the People, Mr. Wilson from the People's National Movement, and myself as Chief Secretary, and face the people of Tobago to tell the people of Tobago that we are going to work together in this particular process. Mr. Jack and the TOP would have dropped out or withdrawn, but the point about it is that their withdrawal did not in any way undermine the credibility of that process. And therefore we have continued with that process, and we have decided that we're going to do it right. We're going to do it thoroughly, and we're going to do it in a manner that gives us the best chance of success. And therefore that is why, instead of having a number of 1 or 2 public fora, we decided that we're going to meet with all the different sectors in Tobago. So we had about 12 or 13 meetings. We met with the trade unions, we met with the young people, we met with the cultural groups, we met with the community organizations, we met with the farmers and the fishermen. We have 12 or 13 meetings throughout Tobago. And then we went to meet the regions. We've already had a meeting for Southwest Tobago at Robinel's. We had one in Roxrow, Tobago for Northeast, and then we're going to have one for Central Tobago in Maidstone next Thursday. But I think one critical aspect is that we had to meet with our brothers and sisters in Trinidad, because this is about a relationship. And one cannot have a relationship except both parties to the relationship understand what are the major objectives of that relationship and understand what the responsibilities are, what the expectations are. That is the only way that you can have a relationship that is mutually respectful, a relationship in which people understand each other, and a relationship that has a chance of lasting. And therefore, one of the major objectives of this meeting, of this consultation, is to get the views of the people resident in Trinidad. Because you see, over the years, there have been some misconceptions, and we need to ensure that those misconceptions are addressed. There are areas, there are gray areas, where we need to get clarification. And I'm saying that we're hoping that in this discussion, that we'll get the kind of free and frank conversation that will allow us to leave here better informed. And I want to just make the point before I close, because this is not about me. I want to make it very clear that throughout those deliberations, and what we are speaking here about, Mr. Richard will say, is the result not just of the deliberations of the past 3 or 4 months, but deliberations that have extended maybe over 4 or 5 years. And in those deliberations, there would have been certain recommendations that would have been made. But what comes out as a general view is that the people of Tobago want to ensure that the sovereign democratic state of Tobago is inviolate and united. I want to make that very clear. But within that of Trinidad and Tobago, within that sovereign democratic state of Trinidad and Tobago that is united and invalid, Tobago's self-determination must be addressed. And that is the whole purpose of this particular exercise. So that I want us, therefore, to bear in mind what exactly it is that we, the people of Tobago, are asking, and that we do not leave here with any misconception. I just want to take the opportunity to recognize the leader of the opposition, Dr. Keith Rowley, who I suppose is here both in his capacity as leader of the opposition and Tobagonian and resident of Trinidad. So let me just again say that we are expecting, after this exercise, to have the kind of information that will guide us going forward. I want to indicate to you that we expect this consultation to be conducted in a manner that will give people the confidence that we, in fact, are going to take their views very, very seriously. And that is why you have the Secretariat, which is independent, and it is that Secretariat that at the end of the exercise will prepare a report, and that report will go to a convention where that report will be adopted and, of course, amended if necessary. And then, of course, a final document will come forward from after that report, which again will come before the people of Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago for their final comments before we take it to the Parliament and to the Tobago House of Assembly. So let me again reiterate the remarks of the chairperson and really see how happy we are with this very encouraging turnout. I really hope that we have free and frank discussions and we leave here well informed so that we can finally ensure that after 4 decades, Tobago's self-government, Tobago's self-determination is finally addressed, and addressed in a way that is mutually acceptable to the people of Tobago and the people of Trinidad, and of course, the citizens of this great sovereign democratic state. I thank you.
It is my responsibility to take the opportunity to say welcome on behalf of the Tobago Council of the PNM. We'd want to suggest that the remark and the welcome comes out and informs the conception of the name of the Tobago Council. In marking the Tobago Council as the representative organization of the PNM in Tobago, the agreement that that council could exist and should exist demonstrated our understanding of the need for special arrangements in governance in Trinidad and Tobago for an institution which seeks to manage people on both sides of the island. We are saying that this opportunity to work with the THA and the TPT was quite welcomed by the members and officers of the Tobago Council. And it is in that context that our fulsome support was given to these activities. The objectives around which they are cast is the objective of the achievement of self-government for Tobago, that is based on the concept that as a people, self-determination and understanding of the rights that come with it are fundamental to our understanding of how we should be governed in Tobago. The Forum has taken the responsibility and the opportunity to address the issue of self-government in consultation with the relevant people. And by relevant people, it means all who will be affected. And in that context, the public demonstration, the nationwide casting of the discussions are certainly meet and proper. All of that could not have happened without your participation and those who have had the discussion with us. And it's in that context we say thanks to you for coming and giving us of your time. And of course, we hope that before the day is done, the wisdom that you will bring to the table would help in the fulfillment of the objectives we have set, and certainly in furtherance of the drive for achievement of self-government of Tobago. We are quite clear that, as was said earlier, the nation of Trinidad and Tobago should remain united and inviolate. But you know, they say that justice is the only guarantee for peace. And therefore, the peace that will come with self-government can only be achieved by our understanding of the right for self-determination, and certainly of the responsibility of all of us to cast a governance system that gives self-government to Tobagonians in Tobago. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And let me associate myself with the remarks made by the two previous speakers, the Chief Secretary and Brother Dumas. And I want to welcome all of you to this very important discussion or conversation, which actually began nationally, over 37 years ago, when the motion for self-government was passed in our parliament that Tobago should have had it in 1977. And what we have decided to do is to, for the first time, come to the people of Trinidad and to hear their views on this issue. But we must bear in mind that this matter has two elements. One is those issues which are fundamental to Tobago's self-government and Tobago's right to determine its destiny. And two, those issues which are fundamental to a relationship between Tobago and Trinidad. We want to hear your views on both of them. Let me just quickly quote something from Mr. Robinson's motion 37 years ago. Just a small part of it. And then I will make another statement and take my seat. No island in the Caribbean, possibly none in the world, and I may dare say none in the world, not possible, has been the object of so much international rivalry and imperialist ambition. None so much the victim of colonial exploitation and neglect. None has been so kicked about and kicked around like a political football. It is the only island in the Caribbean where the masses of its people has never had any say whatever in the determination of its destiny. Finally, as a result, self-government in the modern democratic sense has been a thing unknown to Tobagonians. Everybody else has had a substantial say in the determination of the destiny of Tobago, except the masses of people who live on the island. That has not changed. It remains so. And I don't want to say whether in fact it has got worse or it remains constant. That is for us to discuss today. Let me just say this finally. We have an opportunity in Trinidad and Tobago at this time to settle this issue and to strengthen the union. Our union, Trinidad and Tobago, is the weakest I know in the Caribbean today. And I say this very quickly. Do you know, if a disaster, and I say God forbid, if a disaster strikes this island of Trinidad, whether it's a hurricane, tsunami, or earthquake, and devastating, God forbid, and did not touch the island of Tobago, do you know that we are there? Our business here is to discuss the strengthening of the union, not to fragment it. It's to strengthen it. Do you know, we bank our money in Tobago, in the banks, those who have. I'm very serious, and it's a serious matter. Very serious. And this is why I went to Mr. London and said, hey, we do this thing wrong. That's why for 37 years we have not been able to achieve this thing. We have been going, PNM going, TOP going, UNC going, and all of them are having a private conversation with people. And we're saying that we must come together to speak to those who still control us with one voice. When we are through with that, and we get what Tobago deserves, then the fight begins. As you know, no island, and I'll come back to these two very quickly, no country that I know of in the world where one political party of that country would have gone to those, and I use this word very guardedly, to the colonial master and obtain the internal self-government, or the independence. None that I know of. All parties have to go. Let's come to Trinidad and Tobago. When Trinidad and Tobago wanted its independence, its internal self-government and independence from the United Kingdom, it was not the PNM who was in government that way. It was the DLP under Dr. General Capilio and Dr. Williams that went. And they went, they got it. But after you got it, there must be an election as to who must deliver those services. There is where the fight must take place, not before. I saw someone with a jersey yesterday before I made the final point. You know what it says? And this is not a message for Trinidad, it's a message for Tobago. United, we bargain and demand. Divided, we beg. And that's the position that Tobago takes. And the point I'm making about the weak union and close is this. We bank our money in Tobago. Do you know if there's a disaster in Trinidad that didn't touch Tobago? Our money is gone. Do you know that the issue that you had on the highway in Trinidad with the Sentinel vehicle, you know, it's Tobago money that leaves Tobago, come down to Trinidad and coming back? Lost one? This is serious. It's as serious as that. It's not a joking matter. Very serious. If you are devastated, we can't help you die. The chief secretary would not be able to employ anybody the following day in Trinidad because there's no treasury. No check to come up for the chief secretary to keep people employed in Tobago. You have an accident in Tobago where you require to send the victim to either Moncton for further medical management. If Trinidad is devastated, God forbid, the person dies. We're talking about strengthening a union where Tobago must play its part and Tobago must make its contribution so that in case something goes wrong with you, God forbid, that we will have the institutions of governance on the island of Tobago to continue to see about the people of Tobago, and not only that, to render force assistance to you in Trinidad. I would want to sit back and hear your contribution on such a very important matter. I don't want to say more. But this is what we are about. Not about fragmentation, secession. You don't discuss secession. You take that. We're coming to discuss the right of the people of Tobago to determine how they should be governed and our relationship with our brother and sister who have had a long relationship, should they die. So let me thank you all very much, and we sit back and hear your views, and we are going to be prepared to respond to your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. And we now have a video presentation entitled Towards Tobago's Autonomy.
Present in a way forms the precursor to the process that we are going through, and to the point that we are at this afternoon here at the University of the West Indies. As the chairperson says, we will put together as a team with Mr. Peterson, senior counsel as a member, Deborah Moore McGinnis, another lawyer, which Tobago would, in some form or fashion, have some area of self-government. In terms of reference, this commission was put together by the Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly, and it was in response primarily to the green paper that was put forward by the Attorney General and the Ministry of Health. And we were given the following terms of reference. We are to review the submission of the John Prince Working Committee. The John Prince Working Committee had in fact been established by the Assembly some years prior to 2010. The green paper that was put out by the Ministry of the Attorney General, the current Tobago House of Assembly Act, the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, and other related documents. We are also supposed to organize a program of activities that would assist us in looking at all the offerings, legislative and otherwise, that we put forward. And we were to prepare a report to respond to the green paper, because there was a timeline for responding to what was put out in the green paper. And in doing all of those things, we were to recruit the necessary expertise and to undertake the catch-all of any other related activities. Out of that set of terms, or the terms of reference that we are working with, we developed three main objectives, or working objectives. And the critical one was to provide a comprehensive report in response to the terms of reference, and within that report to propose legislation, because we found that that was perhaps the best way to indicate what our findings were. And the legislation would embody the demands of the people. That was a critical objective. Okay. The methods that we use in order to do a lot of what we did was literature review, more secondary rather than primary research. So we looked at some of these critical documents. The 1977 motion by A.N.R. Robinson for internal self-government, the Simongal draft that came out of that, the 1980 THA Act, the draft by the Manning administration that took place between 1992 and 1995, the review of the constitutional and legislative arrangement for Tobago, that was the Gaya Prasad Committee, and that was the precursor, if you wish, to the 1996 Tobago House of Assembly Act. The Constitutional Amendment Act number 39 of 1996 and the THA Act number 40 of 1996. People are not always aware that there were really two acts that gave birth to the Tobago House of Assembly new legislation in 1996. The Constitutional Amendment that inserted the House of Assembly in the Constitution for the first time, and the number 40 which is the prescribed the laws that says how the House of Assembly should operate. There is some debate as to whether, I say inserted into the Constitution, sometimes people say entrenched in the Constitution. There's some debate as to whether this means that a supermajority is required to take it out of the Constitution. There is legal opinion which seems to suggest that it can be removed from the Constitution without a supermajority, because it does not fall within Section 54 of the Constitution that lists the sections that require a supermajority to remove it. So that's for the legal people. And of course, ultimately, perhaps for the political people to see, to take whatever measures must be taken to ensure that it cannot be removed by a simple majority. Okay. So, yes, we also to look at the work of the Regidumas team and the work of the Tobago Forum for Consensus and the work of the John Prince Committee. Now, those three sets of documents or work that were undertaken by these groups. The first two, the Reginald Dumas team and the Tobago Forum, were conducted by private citizens who, on their own accord, from as far back as early 2000, at the turn of the century, started doing work on their own in terms of bringing about constitutional change, constitutional reform for the two islands in terms of the relationship between those two islands. The John Prince Committee got into it in 2005, 2006, based on a motion moved in the Assembly that says that the Assembly should set up a committee to do that. The PP manifesto, the People's Partnership Manifesto, we also looked at because they spoke to the relationship between the island. The legislative proposals submitted to the government by the THA and the legislative proposals submitted by the THA to the government came out primarily out of the work of the John Prince Committee. And of course, the Attorney General's Green Paper, which precipitated the action that brought the Commission into being. We're also supposed to look at the laws, regulations, and other mechanisms from other countries, and we see the federal structure of government, because the people had specifically said that a federal system is what they would like to see. Okay, coming out of all of those sets of studies or group work that took place, as we said, from the turn of the 20th century into the 21st, a set of core fundamental demands or wishes, if you wish, emanated from these discussions. And people were saying specifically, and there are about 13 of them that came to the fore, that every single one of those reports indicated that that was, in fact, what the people wanted, including the Green people. So it speaks to equality of status between the islands and the legislative framework to reflect such equality. It speaks to a federal system of government, if you wish, authority in the THA to deal with fiscal measures, taxations, either to impose or not impose, to develop and implement tax policies, the ability to borrow to fund Tobago's development without the current hindrance that occurs, the removal of cabinet dominance to override decisions made in Tobago. definition of the boundaries of each island, jurisdiction and economic control over marine resources, freedom of the THE to make laws to govern Tobago, and definition of the relationship between parliamentarians and the THE, legislation for the wider participation of the society in the decision-making process of Tobago. So people, in this particular demand, what people are saying, all of those things previously that have been highlighted were necessary for the island to behave as a constituent component of the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. And in doing so, it also wanted to ensure that the people had a greater participation in what this government in Tobago was doing, and in some ways, not merely participation, but to have control in the decision-making process in a meaningful way. So that was a critical element of the demands of the people. Coming out of all of the review that we would have done, we proposed the following. That a structure of governance that took into account the different islands, and that each one would have its own government, and then we have a government that would supersede both islands and be the national government, which is essentially what a federalist structure is, and that's what the people were saying they wanted. So they wanted a government for Tobago, which by and large is there in some rudimentary fashion, a government for Trinidad, and a government of Trinidad and Tobago that would be comprised of some mechanism that allows for equity in the way that national government was in fact formed. The national government would have control and residual responsibility for a whole set of predetermined activities, and each of the island governments would have predetermined responsibility for different areas of activity. In fact, what is suggested now is that we have Tobago House of Assembly, which could be called the Government of Tobago, and then we have a government that is called the National Government, but is in effect a government of Trinidad, and at the same time a government of Trinidad and Tobago. And people say perhaps what you need is a distinct government for Trinidad that would also include the municipalities as local government, and then a structure, a government that is responsible for the whole country that would include the government of Trinidad and the government of Tobago. I think that's what the people were suggesting. And following on from that, and in fact following on from Section 1 of the Constitution that identifies the nation as the island of Trinidad and the island of Tobago, except that the precise definition of what that means is not there. He's saying a definition of the jurisdictional boundaries would help in that regard. Budgetary considerations that in terms of how we determine the fiscal federalism, if you wish, a number of issues, a number of ways in which this could be done is, and we listed some of them, a grant element, the ability to impose taxes, ability to raise loans, revenue sharing from resources, and as the video just suggested, not only in terms of sharing in marine areas, but sharing generally. And we continue to go through our proposals. The recall provision, and this has become very topical, but people were saying in the meetings in Tobago back then that they wanted a provision to recall, to be able to recall their representatives. We didn't recommend that after studying a number of things, and the reasons why we didn't were manifold and tied to other aspects of what we looked at. One of the, let me tell you firstly what we have discovered, and in recent times people have also saying that. It is not something that is done in the Commonwealth, no country in the Commonwealth. And that is not sufficient reason to not consider it. But just as a matter of note, no Commonwealth country has a recall provision. One province in Canada has attempted it with a fair amount of difficulty. They're constantly changing it because it's not working well. And perhaps I should explain some of the fundamental ways in which it has been done in places where it has been done. Generally, there's no place we saw where you could recall someone before 2 years expired. And then the process by which the recall could and would be generated takes about 9 months before it gets to the point where you can start the process of going into the election mode. And it's never done in the final year of the thing. So if we maintained a 4-year period for the assembly, then you wouldn't get to do the recall until the 4th year. So if it's going to remain a 4-year thing, then we didn't think it made sense. So consequently, we didn't recommend it. Now, on the other hand, people were also suggesting that the assembly should have a 5-year rather than a 4-year. But the reason they were suggesting that was merely for equality or with the national circumstance. And we are saying, if the recall is going to take that long, and 4 years, leave it at 4, and you get to recall your person 4 years. Those are the major reasons for not going with the recall. Where is I? Sorry. Oops, what did I do? All right. Right, good. Community participation. This is one where novel in our circumstance, where we're suggesting, and this was to treat with where people asked for greater participation in the governance structure. And we suggested that we should put something in place. In the case of Tobago, have a second chamber that would be composed of people from village councils, civil society, commercial, and other interest groups. And this chamber will have oversight over some aspects and decision of the executive council. In some ways, this has generated the most heated and animated discussion on what is considered a good thing to put into that. We've made some attempts at suggesting that there should be a partly elected chamber and a partly nominated chamber from the various interest groups. So that was our suggestion there. We felt if you were doing that in a Trinidad circumstance, the thing that would happen, the municipalities would be elected to the second chamber, and the other agencies would also be involved. But that's still but the key issue here is that we should have greater participation, and we feel that the second chamber, in the case of Tobago, is a way to do it with not the people who are elected in the first chamber. Right. The way we attempted to indicate what we felt what the things should be done were in some proposed legislation. We felt that if we go in with the full federal type arrangement, it would take some time. The discussion has to take place, and it would take some time for that to happen. So consequently, we felt that we needed to do a transitional arrangement. And the transitional arrangement would include an amended constitution to affirm the equity between the island of Tobago and the island of Trinidad, and to accord self-governments to Tobago. We needed to do an act to replace the current Tobago House of Assembly Act, number 40, and we also needed to do something to give effect, to start the process of the federal constitution. And consequently, this meant that we had to do three. So the document that you have would have three basic legislative arrangements that would be an expression of what we felt needed to be done. The things that needed to go in there, we felt that we needed to start preparation for a federal type structure. We felt that you needed to put a commission or some kind of entity in place to treat with that. We felt that definition of the boundaries for Trinidad and Tobago was a necessary thing. And we felt that you needed a fiscal review commission, even now, which would address the sharing of revenues between the island, and rather than what currently happens now in terms of the Dispute Resolution Commission recommendation of a percentage of the GDP. We thought that, of the budget. We felt that the Fiscal Review Commission would ultimately take over from this percentage-based thing, and they would review what the economy is doing and make recommendations for the apportionment of the revenue based on the number of things that we talked about before, a grant element and taxation and loans and all of those things. And essentially, that's a brief summary of the work of the commission. It's in a document that I understand has been circulated, and we can attempt to answer some questions if those questions are raised. Thank you very much.
Along with the House Speaker, I think that expectation is the mother of manifestation. And I would not like to hear that the commenter asked for a budget, Trinidad, for 3 billion, 4 billion. I think we need to start looking at expecting to make a budget for Tobago of 15 billion next year. If we're talking about raising your population, if we're talking about developing Tobago, we need to look at stop begging Trinidad for money. Because most of the resources of Trinidad, the oil, is being found money out of Tobago than in Trinidad. Tobago wasn't a wall of Trinidad. Tobago was long from Trinidad, really. You understand? So Tobago really needs to start to look for repatriation money. For the sufferings that Tobago been through all these years, really. So Tobagonian people start to look at developing all their lives, really. Understand? Stop looking small. Stop looking at 60,000 people. You understand? Everything that the people asked for in the last year, we're supposed to start looking at it, really. Trinidad, Mr. Quito, if ever, or when you become Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, start to deal with Tobago in a different aspect, please. You understand? That's right. And I think before we beat to the election, use these periods from August coming to December, because we're preparing for election. And we're supposed to be fighting these strategies that you then. Very vicious. You understand? Stop playing with the system because we've been suffering for too long. I spent time among a Bedouin who was a Tobagonian from Delaford. I know my Bedouin here, Mr. Thomas Omi, who always anyway do, advocating for Tobago too. Right? So we in Trinidad, because most of the people here is from Tobago. You understand? So we need to really look at agriculture. Start developing agricultural bases in the agricultural lands. The Chinese come in and taking land in Trinidad, east, west, north, south, every area is land. Stop selling all the land in Tobago. Any land that has to be sold must go to the THA. The THA must have access. Start to buy back the lands, start to buy back the estates, start to develop agriculture. So when we meet, as Mr. Ashford Jack said, Ms. Mull, Alfred, it's time for us to stop talking on if we get, if we don't get, you understand? Start to take away all you want to be. Mr. Ashford Jack said on future generations, on decision making, but Mr. Ashford Jack backing out right now, you understand? Because Mr. Ashford Jack is being used. You already have the pumpkin house and what you have right now, you understand? So we need to look at things from a different aspect. So thank you very much.
Okay, I agree with everything that has been said so far. And I hear you all talk about development of land in Tobago. I remember a couple of years ago when I was a young teacher in Tobago, the government had made lands available to Tobagonians to develop dairy farms. And I understand that some of the young men used to dig holes in the ground, and the cows would put their feet in it, and when the feet were broken, they would kill the animals and tell the government that people stole the animals or the animals died. What I would like to see is that there's a lot of wasteland in Tobago, and I personally would like to see these land developed. You all talk about increasing the population of Tobago. You need to develop the lands, put out or build housing areas, develop agro-industries so that you can encourage your youth to stay into agriculture and have spin-off industries from agriculture. I would really like to see that the land issue in Tobago is addressed. There's a lot of abandoned cocoa estates that are not being utilized. I personally made an offer to the Tobago House of Assembly for 10 acres of land, and I was told that they were not getting funding from the central government, so they could not develop. So, Mr. London, I would like you to be perhaps more aggressive in approaching the government so that you can have enough funds to develop the lands. Thank you.
In terms of sentiment and feeling, I believe that Tobago ought to have its autonomy. But this is at the level of emotion and sentiment and feeling as a people, what needs to happen. What I have been trying to do is focus my mind on how to make the thing happen, the mechanisms, how to resolve the issues and the conflicts. Equality, for example. How do we bring about equality between two states that are unequal? What are the mechanisms? This has been a challenge in other places, but we need to look for the answers. If not, we will move on the level of feelings, and when the thing happens, we look for a way to resolve the thing, and it's going to break down. It's like the West Indian Federation. Everybody wanted federation. But when it came to taxation and such issues, we ran into a problem. It's like CARICOM. It's like the internal economic market and so on. Everybody wanted to happen. But then when the Guyanese started to come to your country and look for work, you didn't like it. You understand? Or the Jamaicans. So we need to take the discussion down a little bit more to nitty-gritty, so that when the thing happens, we are not surprised by the development. For example, 2 equal states, fine. How does Tobago, having its autonomy, make its contribution to the national state, and that becomes an advantage to everybody? Not just how to get more money out of the treasury. We have to go past that stage. All right? There's some really difficult. The federal concept is a good concept, but how to make it work? It means Tobago autonomous, Trinidad autonomous, and a federal system on top. Now, if you have a federal system, you now have a federal government. And the federal government must be given authorities, powers, to make both states obey, to make both states fall in line. And that's when you're going to get trouble. So we need to take the discussion further down the road into more nitty-gritty details, so that if we go federal, how does that work? What's the cost? What's the mechanism? Who in charge? Because when it came to trying to get the federal government to work in the Caribbean thing, in the West Indies thing, we were into trouble, you know, the distribution of powers. So that is not going to go away. I am very glad that there is a discussion taking place in Trinidad. I had always felt that the discussion about Tobago's autonomy wasn't involving Trinidad. You need, because one state, one country. So you can't just go down to Togo and have a discussion about Togo's autonomy. You have to involve everybody. It therefore raises the issue: how to get everybody in agreement with this, or the majority of people in the country to agree on this thing. Should there be a referendum? You remember the thing about referendum that came up the other day? Should there be a referendum on this matter? Because it's a big step away from the current constitution. I don't know what the law says, but how to make the thing happen? These are challenging issues which must be addressed now to overcome and satisfy the sentiments that these things will generate. Travel. Tobagonians who don't live in Tobago, how do you deal with them? You know, there was mention about Tobagonians who living in Tobago. But there are a lot of Tobagonians living all over New York, Canada, West Indies, up the islands. They want to come home and vote. How do you mechanize that to make sure it happens, and if it's going to happen, properly in the context of some process? Okay? What is the status of Tobagonians' children born in New York or born in Trinidad to this autonomous state that we are talking? The issue of boundaries were mentioned. That's a real difficult thing. A very difficult thing to resolve. The law of the sea. I don't know how many of you know how difficult it was and how long it took to get the law of the sea, which was really a boundaries-oriented issue. It took ages. And it's still not a happy situation. Economic zone, this, that, and the other. So my contribution, without wanting to take too much time, because I see plenty issues here, a lot of good things in the document, but there's some real challenges that I see here. We need more discussion in Trinidad, probably more discussion in Tobago as well. And we need to take some of these issues down to how to make it work.
Good afternoon, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a nice crowd here this evening. My name is Olabisi Koboni, and I live in Dabadi. Since everybody asking where everybody come from, I'm originally from Tobago. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for the clarity, and thanks for the process that you went through. We all of us in Trinidad and Tobago have been having some difficulty with process over the last few weeks and so on. So I would like to acknowledge and recognize that the process that seems to have gone on with this exercise. One or two things, though, that I want to mention. First of all, I'm glad that you said, I think Mr. Charles said, that this is not a political thing. And I want to hope that you are emphasizing that. Because the one thing I would like to say now is that I think that we need to get into a kind of a working out a transition phase. These issues that you raise and these demands and these proposals, as the previous speaker said, are big. And I think that there ought to be an attempt to let it go, move into a transition phase, because it involves both Tobago and Trinidad. It is a whole national transformation that we are looking at, even though it relates to Tobago in particular, but I think that one should start thinking about what are we going to do in terms of transitioning. That's the first thing. Secondly, the issue of the definition of boundaries. Now, it seems as if some people have it very clear in their minds exactly what this is. Mr. Charles spoke initially about a United Nations thing that gives the right to Tobago in terms of its own boundaries. I don't want to go into that now. I just want to say that as much as some of you, and I think everybody at the head table, and other people in the audience and so on, seem to be very clear about this whole thing about definition of boundaries and marine resources that belong to Tobago and so on, there are a whole lot of us for whom there are gaps as well. And so I would like to suggest that you take out this part and treat with it in a much more detailed way, because a lot of us, for some of us, it doesn't add up, right? So since you have all the explanations about it, treat with this item in a much more detailed way. Now, the issue of boundaries seems to be linked to the fact that there are resources in Tobago, and this leads to the idea of revenue sharing. So Tobago would generate its revenue from the resources that it controls, and, similarly Trinidad. I would like to suggest that this notion may be based too heavily on the issue of the natural resources. And you are looking only in terms of what like the marine resources. So there is fish and there is whatever else, and that could generate revenue for Tobago. I think in the 21st century, one has to look at economic development as much or even more in terms of the knowledge that the people bring to their development, and not simply in terms of the natural resources that are there available in the environment. And revenue generation, insofar as what Tobago is going to generate for itself, must be anchored in terms of knowledge creation and of building the economy based on the knowledge that you bring to the situation. I think that has to be, and if that is the case, then the whole business of the natural resources may take a lesser position. Not that it's not important. I agree with the sister who talked about the land issue, but the land is not going to work for the people if you don't bring the knowledge to work the land for the people. Next, the question about the federal structure. I think it is an ideal that is a must. But there are lots of, obviously, problems with that. The previous speaker referred us back to the federal government, the federation, and we all know what will happen with the West Indies Federation because we did not work through the nitty-gritty of it. In doing so, I would like to suggest that the whole issue that came out of the people's consultations about people participation and those structures at a lower level or at a different level to have oversight of the executive council, I think that probably priority should be given to development at that level, so that we spread the whole business of people empowerment in a more organized and structured way at that level, because I feel it is that level of organization that is going to make for success or failure. And finally, just one brief comment about the presentation, the executive summary from Ms. Cowie. It seemed to me that even though the people were commenting and giving their views on the proposals that came from the committee, that the thinking at that level seemed to be at the level of government in Trinidad and Tobago and THA in Tobago. They seem to be still thinking along the lines of a THA as it currently exists in Tobago with a government in Trinidad. So therefore there is a mindset that seems that would need to be developed, if we are going to talk about this whole business of a federal structure for Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Peace be upon the head table and peace be upon all the people assembled. Good evening, good afternoon. I want to do more than, well, the name is Kwesi Atiba and I'm from Lavantie. Really, I want to ask a question more than make a statement. I have always dealt with the self-government, internal self-government for Tobago as a given. And when I have a document that says 37 years ago, that was a motion in the parliament, I would want an answer from anybody on the head table or anybody in the audience what the problem is or what the problems are.
Good afternoon, greetings to all. Can I use one of my minutes in making my deliberation on this topic? My name is Reginald Vidal, and I'm chairman of the Dr. Eric Williams Memorial Committee. Members of the head table, I want to specially invite these points that I'm going to make. And I want to thank Tobago for coming to Trinidad this afternoon to deliberate on this long outstanding topic. And for the last 16 years, I have been visiting Tobago, and on each occasion, there's a development that is taking place. And on every occasion, I am seeing Tobago developing at a rapid rate. Tobago's development, as far as I'm concerned, and I want to thank those who are contributing to the development of Tobago in a very meaningful way. And while I am seeing all this development taking place, I am seeing Tobago as being inhibited by its development, and I am asking myself, why is this taking place? After 37 years, I don't even think that when Dr. Williams went to Marlborough House for independence, that it took as long as a year in terms of preparation. I don't think so. And I cannot understand why Tobago, after 37 years, cannot get what they want. So where do we go from here in terms of cause and effect? I am not going to try and attempt to give an academic perspective of what has been taking place, because I think that Tobago has already decided, because of their deliberations, as to where they are going. So where is Tobago going? But everything else, okay, where is Tobago going? What Trinidad is to Grenada, Barbados, Jamaica, and other islands, Canada, and other international countries, it can be to Tobago. And this afternoon, this talk has to come to a stop, to an end. And my suggestion is, if you cannot get what you want from central government, then you have to go somewhere else. Federal court, whatever you will, but you have to go somewhere else. It must come to an end. It cannot no longer continue. It has to come to an end. And how does it come to an end? I am directing that team at that head table to take all that you have in the documents that were given to me this afternoon on self-government for Tobago, take it somewhere else. You might not be able to take it to a Marlborough House, but you can take it somewhere else. Tobago is self-sufficient. Tobago is a developing young country. Tobago has its resources. Tobago has its professionalism. Tobago can sell to Trinidad what Trinidad can't sell to Tobago. So today, I have come here to make my contribution, to tell the people of Tobago, the time has come. The time is now. Talk has ended. We are going in a different direction. And we are going in a direction because we deserve to go in a direction, to have it so that we can manage it for our own development, for our children, for our children's children. We have to take the destiny of Tobago into Tobago hands and let Tobago forge their own destiny. And I could recall some years ago when Dr. Murray had planted a flag, I think it was at Pigeon Point, Plymouth. I hope that Dr. Murray still has that flag. I hope he has not thrown it away. And I ask that that flag be representative in due course. And I give the commencement of negotiations towards that new dispensation. Don't worry, Tobago will always be friends with Trinidad. And Trinidad will always be friends with Tobago, as we are with other countries. But Tobago has to get what it wants. The talk has to stop. 37 years of talk. You're going to go on talking and talking and talking. When is it going to come to an end? And I'm saying after this afternoon, consider going in a different direction. Talk done. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to the head table. I would like to make 3 comments on the discussions. My name is Stephen Kangal, and I have a special interest in the question of the maritime boundaries around Tobago. I'm from Trinidad. The first point I'd like to make is that I find that in the presentation by Dr. Richards and as well by Ms. Cowie, that you are using the terms equality of status and you are making it appear as if it is equal to or synonymous with the whole question of equity. And I've seen several references there. So what I would like to suggest, there's need to bring about a harmonization between the two terms because they do not mean the same thing. Because you're talking about equal economic status between Trinidad and Tobago, then you're talking about equitable sharing of revenues and so on. So I think you need to be able to focus on that and use the term whether you mean equity or equality, because equality does not always mean equity. The second point I would like to make is that there is a need in Tobago to be able to have the kind of expertise that can look after Tobago interests, especially when it comes to the boundaries of Tobago or and so forth. For instance, I looked at the Tobago House of Assembly Act number 40. That has been in existence since 1996. But in defining what is the jurisdiction of Tobago, they spoke of the baselines of Tobago. I do not know what are the baselines of Tobago as far as I'm concerned. And in fact, if you look at southern Tobago, there are no baselines, so that since 1996, the question of the maritime extent of the jurisdiction of the Tobago House of Assembly has been in abeyance, because if you're marking it 6 miles from the baselines of Tobago, there are no baselines in south of Tobago, and that is something that you need to be able to address and to be very vigilant about. The last point I now would like to address the whole question of the maritime boundaries, both of Trinidad and of Tobago, but more with respect to Tobago. Now, these boundaries, there are only one particular area north of Tobago where a boundary has not been established. There's a boundary between Tobago and Grenada. There's a boundary between Tobago and Barbados, right? That has been established, and I'd like to make the point that when the boundary was established between Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, every point on that boundary that separates Trinidad and Tobago from Barbados, every point was measured from Little Tobago. And that is to emphasize the very crucial and strategic position of Tobago in terms of the determination of the boundaries between Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. As I said, on the west of Tobago, you have the Trinidad and Tobago, Venezuela. That has not been established yet. So that's the other area where we do not have a boundary. But we have a boundary on the east that has been established, and boundaries on the north. I think they have to establish the boundary, say, between Tobago and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That is still in abeyance. Now, I'd like to make a reference to this. In the report presented by Mr. Richards, there are in fact a definition of Trinidad and Tobago. There's a definition of Tobago, and there's a definition of Trinidad. And in establishing sovereign rights over the living and non-living resources, normally in international law is the state, like the state of Trinidad and Tobago, that will have the jurisdiction and control over the exploration and the exploitation of the living and the non-living resources. But this is not something which I consider to be strange. Because in Trinidad today, what we have the Ministry of Energy exercising on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago the exploration, exploitation, management of our, let's say, the hydrocarbons. The Ministry of Energy is headed by a non-elected senator. And then you have public servants who are not elected. But the Tobago House of Assembly is an elected body. And therefore, politically speaking, that has a superior authority. And in my view, I do not see any problem with the Tobago House of Assembly exercising sovereign rights over the living and non-living resources of the economic zone around Tobago, and doing that on behalf of what may be called a federal state or the existing state. So this, I believe, is something that can be done because you have a non-elected body doing the same job when an elected body can do it as well. So that there is enough justification for Tobago to be given the jurisdiction, the power to undertake sovereign rights over the living and non-living resources, because the economic zone around Tobago can easily be identified. Thank you very much.
I will deal with that. My first, what I should say, liaison with Tobago is as a baby. I was delivered by Nurse Dumas, who is the mother of your famous Reginald Dumas, who grew up here in Shogunna. If you also want to know what my affiliation with Tobago as a boy, I always visited Tobago and see the destruction you all have done to the most beautiful reef I ever saw in my life. Further, between November 1973 and June of 1976, I was stationed in Tobago as a public servant, where I lived for that time. So I have some idea of Tobago. In dealing with this matter, my first problem when I heard about it yesterday was to find out the latest. So I went up on the website and I couldn't find anything latest. Maybe it's my inability to fully master my computer. So I made some notes as to questions, but when I came here, I was given a document that had practically all the information I required, and I cannot understand why it wasn't readily available on your website, first of all. Secondly, because a lot of my questions I see is addressed in this document, but I could not fully digest the document in the limited time here. So I would like to get, first of all, some explanation. And if you want to give the explanation one by one, it might save me some time further on. On the financing, the document seemed to suggest that 8% of total revenue, I assume, between Trinidad and Tobago should be allocated to whoever is the government of Tobago. Is this in addition to the amounts they talk about collecting in Tobago and by Tobagonians who pay such figures in Trinidad? That's on that first thing. And thirdly, will in addition to that be the results of these economic resources within the waters of what you would like designated for Tobago? So is you say the finances should be the 8% of total revenue, plus these amounts that are collected in Tobago, plus those that Tobagonians pay in Trinidad, on that heading, plus the results of the exploitation of the marine resources. That's the first one. Secondly, I see something talk about equality or equity of representation in Parliament. And I think you're talking about there about the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Because what I should see, anomaly I see in this document, is they refer to our government of Trinidad. There never have been, and I hope there never will ever be, a sovereign government of Trinidad. I like Trinidad and Tobago. That's my position. Right? And when they say equity in Parliament, what do they mean? Do they mean equal number of people representing Tobago as representing Trinidad? Is that what you mean? Well, you wouldn't want to answer that now, okay. We talk about the definition of the boundaries of Trinidad. And in addition to what Mr. Kangal said, the definition of Trinidad and Tobago land have always been clearly defined. In an attempt to appease political sentiment, the Act was amended to put a zone in the sea attached to Tobago. No such zone was put for Trinidad. That's the problem you have to address. We asked for THA to have the responsibility for making policy. But the THA, like every other state agency, has that power. But in Trinidad and Tobago, what is supreme is the Constitution and the laws. And to carry out these things, you have a cabinet. And the cabinet duty is to see that the laws of the country are carried out by everybody and every government institution. And the cabinet is required to make policy to ease this function that they have. There is one provision on cabinet policy, and that the policy must be in harmony with the law. Of course, we know we have had for the last 20 years governments who make policy that is have total disregard for the law. And that is the major problem. We also have that the THA is to have jurisdiction and control over Tobago. My question on this document, which I'm talking about right now, I'm not talking about plans for the next 37 years, is who will have this jurisdiction and control over Trinidad? Will it be the various governmental agencies, the boroughs, the regions? Because if we're talking about a government of Trinidad, that appears to me to be repugnant. That you will have a government for Tobago, for how much, 60,000 people. You will then have a government in Trinidad for what, 1.3 million people. And then you will have a net government for 1.3 million plus 60,000. That do not appear to me to be very practical. And when you look at the sort of resources, I mean, I read in the papers last month about the cost of a house for the chairman of the House of Assembly and how much it costs to repair and all that thing. What are we going to have this for every man in every regional authority? I mean, you must compare it when you look at what the parliament tried to pay themselves as salary. Because our governments have made it very clear that what they intend to do is to pocket the money they have joined the gimme gang. And I am not going there. They want the right to make laws. But all our governmental agencies above regional authority have had this power. But the power is circumscribed. And it must be if you have a sovereign government of Trinidad and Tobago. You cannot have two sovereign governments. You talk about federation, yes. But how can you have a federation? It's not like the American people, who you had a number of sovereign states who decided to make a federation and to give it certain amount of power. We don't have that here. No, I finish it. But if you want me to stop, I could stop. So what? So I could say there are 400. The authority to borrow. Tobago have the authority to borrow. What it appears is they want an unfettered authority to board. That again is repugnant to good government if they are not the sovereign state. You want the removal of the dominance of cabinet. How? That is cabinet's duty. You say there's a conflict between the Constitution, Section 75, and the Tobago House of Assembly, Section 25. I have read them, I see no conflict, because the cabinet is the supreme authority under the parliament, and it has to be in any sovereign country. Next, we talk about defining the role of the THA. Look, everything here was in the document circulated. Let's already read it, that's my problem. And the THA. What are you suggesting? That the THA must instruct the elected representative of Tobago as to what they say in cabinet? If that is so, make it clear. You talk about the widest participation of citizens in Tobago. What is there preventing that? Is it any different from what is preventing the people of Trinidad in having their widest presentation? And finally, you talk about having the regional ferry, the inter-island ferry, under the control of Tobago. That appears to be illogical because the harbor in Port of Spain would normally have a higher degree of expertise in that field. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson, Chief Secretary Honorable Orville London, former Chief Secretary Honorable Ho Choi Charles, former Cabinet Minister Mr. Damas, Mr. Richards, other members of the subsidiary table, Mrs. or Dr. Cowie, members in the audience, including Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, the Leader of the Opposition, members of the Senate, and all other distinguished members, as you all are here today. My remarks are going to be very brief. I am here to give, my name is Mark McPean. I am from Trinidad. As I said, my remarks are very brief. I am here to lend support to the self-autonomy status that Tobago is seeking, very rightly deserving, and I will briefly give a historical context of it that members, I think, from Tobago and Trinidad should be very proud of. I also agree with my colleague here, Reggie, that the time has come. The talking should stop. Too many years have passed, especially now in this historical context that Tobago was the first territory in this entire new world that was granted independent autonomous status on the 7th of October, 1763. Exactly 250 years ago, October coming, last year was the 250th anniversary of Tobago being the first independent self-governing territory in the New World. America only got that afterwards from 1776 and specifically 1783. Also, the other legislative bodies that existed throughout the Americas, including the colonies of the United States, were appointed bodies. Tobago actually had its own elections on the 12th of December, 1770. With this background, I think respect is due to be given to Tobago that this process ought to be speeded up. And it seems that with this present government, there's no interest anymore on Tobago, unless I should say there was ulterior motives in the past, but they have dropped it. So it looks like we will have to depend on another government, and it seems that that will be no other than the next and inevitable Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley. And Basically, I wanted to end the remarks here. I'm just going to reiterate again. The time has come. I think this should be the last talk shop, and that action should be taken. So, Madam Chairperson, members of the audience, thanks for giving me this brief opportunity. Thank you.
Head table, ladies and gentlemen, I am also like Reggie and the good gentleman there, Neville Brown. I'm from Tobago. And, but I would like to say two things. One, and very important, I'm very happy about, is that I've seen the parties, the warring parties in Tobago, have come together for the first time that I could recall to come and present to us a Tobago united front. If there's division in Tobago, pointless coming to Trinidad to talk about in the, autonomy and so on when you all can't agree in Tobago. That's the first thing. Secondly, I'm very happy to see, I think it's the first time that the Tobago House of Assembly has taken its case to Trinidad, because you can't do this alone. Even if there's a new prime minister, you still can't do it alone. You have to face Trinidad. And I am glad that you are coming to clear up some of the ideas here. And I want to recommend that you do this a couple more times in Trinidad before you decide, like my good friend here who wants response now. Let us finish, do the thing properly, and get the result that we hope we will get. Thank you very much.
A very pleasant evening, everyone. Madam Chair, members of the head table, most distinguished people, Dr. Rowley and the whole crew, and all my Ghanaian people, if they're Trinidadians, say welcome as well. Barry Thomas is my name. I think most people know me. If you're Ghanaian, you know me. Barry Thomas, Kenneth Barrington Thomas, son of Lindsay and Daphne Thomas from Canaan and Tobago. And I normally don't get involved in these kinds of things. I write my stuff. Dr. London has received I call him doctor just for reasons, he knows why, a very, very comprehensive report about my feelings about these things. He hasn't bothered to respond to me as yet, but that's between the two of us. I listen when my brother Kwame speaks about the 37 years, you know. A blessed evening to all, obviously, and Merry Christmas. But as the old saying goes, all things in this world rise and fall on leadership. And if something has taken 37 years at this level to still be in old talk mode, then it says that there's been no leadership with the will to execute. That's all. Yeah? You could talk how much you want and get into all kind of old stories. There has been no leadership that has been willing to execute. Let us therefore assume, and it's good to assume sometimes, let us assume that what we are seeing suggests that there is some kind of definite decision to bring this thing to some kind of head, or certainly to a start. We are beginning the process of execution, and I think that deserves a loud round of applause. Should we now? Yeah? Oh God, let me give the people a round of applause now. Yeah, good. It is a delightful thing to see the heavy roller and Mr. London sitting next to each other. You know, and I really mean that. I tad both Tobagonians for not acknowledging the presence of these people when they walk into a room. We're so small and tiny, and yet we have so many fractions among us. Put 90 Tobagonians in a room and you have 900 tribes right there. We know that. Who went to bishops versus who went to junior sec, and who is seven-tongue, sevenfold ministry versus who is five, and who born again versus who's Anglican, and all kind of dotishness, right? A friend of mine was telling me now that in parties in Tobago, what is that? You have a party now, and what we have are VIPs and VVIPs, and then other forms of VIPs and so on. We just need to get away from it. What we need to do is to come together. And the point I want to make, the primary point I want to make, there are only three. We boast about our Ghanaian-ness and our supreme brilliance across the face of the earth, don't we now? Can't we put together a team of 33 of the most equipped Tobagonians and just get this thing done in a short space of time? Like, why can't a think tank of 33 Tobagonians just get together, pull all the data, and just make this happen in the space of 6 or 9 months? What stops us from doing that? We run the whole world. I mean, really, what stops us from doing it? And that's the kind of question that I sit there listening. I don't really want to talk, but it irks me that we're all so powerful in our various domains, but something like this takes 100 years to get done. That's one thing I like to throw out to you, Zalma. You know, that we really put together a very powerful think tank of Tobagonians who are ready and just execute. Is that okay, Mr. Charles? Is that okay? Yeah, Alan, is that okay? Yeah, straight up talk. If there's a real consultation, then let's consult. Let's just put together a think tank and execute and get this done. Whatever it is you want to achieve. I don't know what you want to achieve. I'm hearing all kinds of things. But maybe we could just do it in a phase basis. Stephen would probably talk more about that. But what is level 1 for us? And does that take more than 13 months? What is level 2? Can we knock that off in 36 months? Change a government or no change a government? Are we going somewhere here? Yes. Are we going somewhere here, people? Yes. Here's what's critical. I want to recommend a book to all those of us who are interested in this process. And you may want to take a note of this. There's a book called Startup Nation. Startup Nation. You may want to read it if you're very serious about this process. Startup Nation, and there's another one called The Jewish Phenomena. Those are 2 books about the state of Israel, and I really want to recommend to us, if we are serious about bringing Tobago into this first world, standing on its own, whatever levels, I don't get into your levels, that you really want to look at the model that the state of Israel has executed over the last 60 years or so. There is no other model for us to study on the face of the earth if we are serious about what we're doing. I want to go one stage further. We have farmed out our energy resources to foreign bodies for the last 60 years in this country, not true? Yeah? Our energy, all the billions and trillions of dollars are owned by others except us, really, and we get a little change on the background. Well, why can't we farm out the process, if we want to some people who have done it before us? Or bring them on board as strong consultants. If we can't get it right among ourselves for 37 years, why continue to beat around the bush? So perhaps we need to get a couple of the boys from Israel and a couple from Singapore, for example, and use the Singapore-Israeli crossover experience to create what we want. We'll probably get it done inside the next 36 months, I'm sure. But the book Startup Nation gives you an extremely fascinating guide as to how the Jews have done it. How the Israelis have turned absolute fertile desert into absolute... Speak of the minds. The question, let me just make one final point, because if we're doing a consultation, let's talk. Tell me time. Our people wants to be autonomous, semi-autonomous, whatever, but we can't feed ourselves. If you can't feed yourself, how do you plan to be, quote unquote, I just use the term, independent of anyone or anything? Are we just going to follow the Trinidad model where we buy everything we eat from abroad? That's pending madness. And I therefore would like to suggest, in preparation for us achieving these things we say we are aiming at, that we get serious about growing food or some kind of system of producing our own food in the island, or producing it in Guyana or Suriname but owned by us. Is that okay? I'm talking to Zalma and her team here, the head table. We can never be serious about going solo if we cannot feed ourselves. I really just wanted to mention that. Let's stop talking around the bush and start doing things that are serious in preparation for the day when that thing happens, whenever it happens and however it happens. Until Tobago makes a decision and Tobagonians make a decision that they can grow food, will grow food to feed their children, then there's no point in talking about going on your own. A blessed evening to all.
Okay, good afternoon. In the interest of time, all protocols observed. Name is Stephen Shepherd. Born in Tobago, raised in Tobago, live in Trinidad, work in Trinidad, in Tobago several times a year. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding in some quarters about what this afternoon is about. It's not about secession. The name of the country is Trinidad and Tobago. What it is about having decisions for Tobago made in Tobago. That's fundamentally what it's about. It has very wide implications. I'll give you some examples of what I speak about. In 1997, I was head of TSTT in Tobago. I reported to Mr. Charles. When I went to Tobago, there was one cell site in Signal Hill. That decision was made in Trinidad. Engineers in Trinidad were asking me, where is Englishman's Bay? They come several times, they can't find it. There's a place called Bloody Bay that up to then had no telephones whatsoever. Because I was there, I knew what to do. I designed the network in Tobago. We got it built. I gave the plan to Mr. Charles. The network in Tobago now is my design. And because the decision was made in Tobago, driven by Mr. Charles, who was Chief Secretary at the time. And that's what we're trying to get. Autonomy, internal self-government, call it what you want. You want a system, a model, where the decisions are made in Tobago because Tobago knows what it wants. Basically. What I'm also hearing is some lack of self-confidence in what you want to do. Tobagonians have been running most of this country for the last 30 or 40 years. Just ask, we could do it, all right? Now, one of the things, though, I want to stress is on the need for innovation among the people in Tobago. Now, those of you who have been through the airport in Miami or New York, you'll see an HSBC advertisement that says, in the future, our exports will be transmitted and no longer transported. What you're saying is, gone are the days of heavy manufacturing and so on. Let's use the brains. The brains are there in Tobago. I'll give you a couple of examples. While I was in charge of TSTT, there were some young ladies with 8, 9, 10 CXCs and CAPE and so on. And I had to run them from the company and say, go and study. Right now, they have PhDs all over the world. They can do it. You have the brain power. Do not disbelieve in yourself. Fundamentally. I mean, I speak after Mr. Charles all the time. Believe in yourself, you could do it. Right? You innovate. You do not have to have, no longer, if you look at the advanced countries, they're not exporting huge, big stuff anymore. They're exporting knowledge. Build the knowledge. Build the capability. They are bright people. You are bright. You can do it. The only other point I want to make is, I know Barry spoke about agriculture and so on. I needed to look at Sir Arthur Lewis's work, the industrialization of the British West Indies with unlimited supplies of labor. And basically the thesis there was the islands of the Caribbean are too small to sustain meaningful agriculture. I'm not saying kill agriculture. I'm saying do not depend only on agriculture. Depend for the most part on your brain. There was a time when Tobago fed Trinidad. Unfortunately, that's no longer the case. Trinidad can't even feed itself now. It imports $4 billion worth of food every year. That's very bad. All right? So my point is still maintain the agricultural sector for what it's worth, but develop the brain power of the people. We're moving into a knowledge economy, people. Factories will not do it anymore. Agriculture alone will not do it. Your brain is what will do it. Keep developing it. And I just want to reiterate what this is about. It's about having the decision-making for Tobago based in Tobago because Tobago knows what it needs. It's not about secession. It's not about breaking up the country into another one, standing by its own and so on. Wrong notion. Thank you very much.
A special good evening to the head table. I am Nicole Alexander. I'm a member of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Nutritionists and Dietitians. My connection to Tobago, actually my uncle, deceased uncle, Dowling Alexander, he was a principal there. And Nola Adams is my cousin. And I love Tobago. I've visited Tobago for the past years. I can't count how many times. I just love Tobago. All right, my major concern is to deal with food security. And what was said by the former speaker there, we really have to focus on providing food for ourselves. Yes, we may not be able to supply all that we need, but we need to focus a bit more on agriculture if you're going to work on autonomy. And I do agree with autonomy for Tobago, because I believe Tobago has enough expertise to rule its own island. And also, but what I'll also be concerned about is we know that you may have to continue to import some expertise because you may not have enough human resource to cover all that you need. So there'll always be a synergy between Trinidad and Tobago with human resource. So I would like to encourage this, and I would like to thank THA for coming across and holding this consultation, but food security is of importance.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to the head table, and they're all my friends at the head table. We all go back a long time, including the Chief Secretary. And of course, the next Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago sitting down in front of us. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Rowley. I'm a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, right next door. Oh, sorry, I am Anthony Birchwood, Dr. Anthony Birchwood, lecturer at the University of the West Indies. I am very happy that this forum is being held here in Trinidad, and indeed, we welcome the opportunity that we can say something on Tobago's development. And indeed, for that reason, I would like to encourage the THA to make a lot of information available to us, your local diaspora from Tobago. Because many times I have to go on television to speak on the budget matters and so on. Some of you all would have seen me on television speaking of these things. But many times I don't have the data on Tobago. And that is something I would like to encourage if we could find a way of networking with us from Tobago who would also like to make a contribution to Tobago through these kinds of national fora. The next thing I want to speak of, because I don't want to stay too long to incur the agony of the crowd. So the next thing I want to speak of, and probably the last point I want to make, is that we have to be very careful with respect to the Tobago. Well, I am a member of the National Reparations Committee, so let me say that first. I'm a member of the National Reparations Committee. One of the things that we have to seek all the time is how to actually get the contributions of our Africans recognized. And another thing I want to mention on this is that the lands in Tobago, we have to be very careful, because I understand there's a vexing case where certain lands are being actually proportioned to non-owners. Yeah, I understand that is happening. And we have to be very careful. I understand, for example, you have lawyers here in Trinidad who are signing over deeds to non-owners and is estates that actually have no local owners, and they are actually trying to sign over the properties. What I would like to encourage the House of Assembly to do, through your legal departments probably, is to actually find this out to see if any of this is true. And if that is true, then that is a very vexing situation. So I encourage you to look at it. I would not want to take up much of your time again, because I agree with everything that was said. And so I'll hand over the mic and have a seat.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Trim of Crown Point, formerly, and over here in Trinidad. All protocols observed. I'd just like to make 3 quick points. And before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of the leadership in Tobago vis-a-vis taking the case bringing the case here to Trinidad, and for the work that they have done throughout the years in bringing this question to some sort of a conclusion. I'd just like to make 3 quick points having regard to what has already been said. And the 3 things are: 1, I'm concerned about security in Tobago vis-a-vis the rise in criminal activity and, of course, lack of appropriate customs and immigration management around the island. What I'll therefore suggest, and this is not the first time that this has been suggested, is the question of perhaps some sort of a local, I'm talking about regional Tobago police type of service, which can actually effectively treat with those kinds of issues that relate to the protection of the Tobago's security needs. So that's 1. The second thing I'd like to emphasize and raise has to do with the question of residential status for voting in Tobago. I think we should perhaps maybe even go to a referendum. I'm not too sure. In our constitution, we have provision for referendum. But I'm concerned, I think in earlier clock, we need to specify or say specifically what is required for a person to be considered eligible to be a Tobago voter when this thing all comes to fruition. And perhaps could be, for that matter, for example, I would state, for example, a person has to be a landowner or paying rent for a particular period of time, maybe 2 years or something like that. But we need to clarify that and make it abundantly clear. In addition to which, as they do in some countries, persons of, who have not been born in Tobago, but let's say have criminal records and that sort of thing, perhaps need to be screened out. So we need to clarify those kinds of matters. Thirdly, I'd like to deal on the question of energy. The time has come for Tobago to take hold of its resources, particularly as we all know, like Block 22 and all those other blocks over there, Hibiscus, etc. This is the actual resources of the nation, and therefore, and I know this is not the first time this has been said, that we need to recognize the worth of that part of the country, and as such, perhaps some sort of a approval process if drilling activity, exploration and production activity is taking place over there, or even transfer, farm out, lease of the production fields, that those types of agreements should be in conjunction with the Tobago House of Assembly, besides not only the ministry here, as it was rightly pointed out by an earlier speaker, where you have a non-elected person taking decisions on behalf of people who have been elected. So those are my 3 points. Thank you so much.
Hello, good day. I'm a young businessman at Arima. Darren Daniel is my name. Will be very short. Thanks for coming across, Mr. Orville London. Thanks for coming across and giving Trinidadians the opportunity to hear some of your concerns. It's just a pleasure being here. Thanks very much. I wish we could help you all with some of all the problems. I know there's a lot of problems. Every time I look at the TV, I always see Mr. Orville London asking for something and not getting it, I should say. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I admire him for that. He always fighting for Tobago, and I would like somebody to make a change, that he won't have to be going through all of that for Tobago. Tobago is a nice place. I have been there numerous times, and I see a lot of changes. And I know, as I say, I am a businessman. I see, when I go to Tobago, I see a bright future. But I know he can't do it alone. So with all the support, I know things will be different in time to come. All right? Take care.
Good afternoon to the head table, Dr. Rowley, ladies and gentlemen. I have 2 questions. One, my name is Carlton James, originally from Delafort, Tobago. 1 point is that you mentioned 6-6 with respect to the EBC. Well, I know that Tobago East, Tobago West, and the North. I would like to know which area number 13 will be coming from. Number 2, you also mentioned about a voice in the parliament. I would like to know if this person will be selected, elected, or by what means such person will be representing the people of Tobago. And last but not least, this is a point that is worrisome. When the aircrafts landed in Tobago, heavy rainfall, you have to wait. This is a problem should be addressed immediately, and I hope Mr. London will look into this matter as soon as possible. This is a problem. Years now this has been happening, and I hope by now and within the next 6 months something should start to remedy this situation. I thank you all very much for this event today, and I hope that we'll have one very soon again. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hilary Bernard. I am from Arima. I am a local government councillor in Arima, but I stand here as an average citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. I am fully supportive of this move towards autonomy for Tobago, but I have a difficulty in understanding some of the terminology that has come up. I hear that this is not about secession, sedition, and separation. But other than the fact that Tobago has, of course, its own unique characteristics, and it is surrounded completely by water, it is a separate island, I am not fully understanding how this really isn't a separation. And perhaps in explaining to the rest of the population as this goes forward, maybe you can draw some distinction between this process and, let's say, for example, people from Northwest Trinidad deciding, well, we have a different characteristic in ourselves. Why we have so many people? I understand it is different, but I am trying to ask that as we go forward in this process, we make a clear distinction between what is happening with Tobago and its move towards autonomy that would be different from, let's say, people from Northwest Trinidad or Southwest Trinidad saying we have so much resources that comes from our region. We have so many thousands of people here, and we probably want to move towards autonomy as well. So my plea is for further explanation so that we wouldn't have people misunderstanding what the process is. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the head table. My name is Orisheti Mewe Pira. Orisheti Mewe Pira. Originally, I'm from Nigeria, but I've been living here now for the past 30 years. I'm here to give my support to what Tobagonians want and what they have been advocating for all these years. But this has nothing to do with the present government, because I'm not a supporter of them anyway. But this has nothing to do with the PNM, the NAR, or any other political parties in the past, or those that are yet to come. It's a human thing, okay? The people of Tobago, regardless of how distinct they are asking the central government of this country to give them the opportunity to govern their own self. It's a human process. It's like you're trying to ask me, and I see myself as the bigger brother, to relinquish some of the control that I've had over you for years. Say, big brother, release a certain portion to me. It's a human thing, and it's a very delicate one. So this is why it has taken 37 years to arrive at the point. So we are still here talking. You see, Tobago will be very wealthy immediately. Immediately, the central government accepts that notion. But there is a degree of envy and jealousy also, so you want to guard your own, your own turf. This is the whole problem here. It has nothing to do with if Tobago can grow its food or the amount of intellectuals that Tobago has. It's the same just as in Trinidad. Trinidad cannot grow its own food. So why are you using that as a yardstick? The oil and gas that Trinidad and Tobago has been spending, the money that comes from the oil and gas belong to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
look at it very well. How do they arrive at the 8% of the budget allocations to Tobago? Do they look at it and say, okay, Tobagonians are merely 20,000, 40,000, 50,000? Who decides that? So this is why I say it's a human process. You need to sit down, think, and until such a time when maturity overtakes everyone that are in charge, the autonomy for Tobago will be delayed. Now, if Mr. Keith Rowley becomes the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago tomorrow, he will be an individual talking to Tobago from Trinidad and representing Trinidad and Tobago. He will not be able to do that by himself. Mr. Robinson was there. That was not done. So it means both parties need to be serious and say, listen, the time has come. If you give Tobago self-government, the island will not just move and run away with the resources that are there. The budget that is coming will be on the 8th of September. How much would that be? 80 billion? And who is to say, who has that authority to say that the share for Tobago will be 8%? Tobagonians, do you all accept that? I don't, but I migrate here to be part of you all. You understand? So I'm speaking for Tobago because I want you all to have what is duly yours. Let me take you all back to Nigeria for 2 minutes. Nigeria was 4 regions, and people were agitating for resources. Then it became 12. Then it became 24. Then it became 36. You see, because all of us want resources to manage our own affairs. And the other aspect is this. Tobagonians, are you all happy with the Minister of Tobago Affairs? Talking down on the Chief Secretary? Every time that I see that on the news, I say, well, what's going on here? You know, so while you are on the road to achieving that self-government, talk to the central government of today and those that will be coming in tomorrow, the first stage, that the Ministry for Tobago Affairs should be abolished. Okay? So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm in support of this process. Thanks a lot.
A pleasant good evening to the head table and everyone. My name is Larry Steed, and I spent over 38 years working in Tobago. I came into contact with many at the head table. I'm sorry Mr. London is absent at this time, but I want to pointedly ask a question as it relates to moves to be autonomous as it relates to financing. Recently, there was a move towards build, own, lease, transfer that took place in Tobago, and there was a judgment handed down. My interest is that I saw a statement, thoughts of the Commission about the Tobago House of Assembly acquiring authority to raise funds outside. Where are we going with this? What is the current status of the Assembly being able to raise funds outside? I would like to see and point out this particular initiative as one which was a move towards true autonomy. What is the current status of the Assembly being able to borrow funds? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Glenn Roach.
formerly from Delaware, Tobago. However, because of my duties, I spent most of my years in Trinidad. As a Tobagonian, I still see myself as a Tobagonian because I spend most of my time there. I am really concerned. I'm heartened by what I'm seeing, by this move. I remember as a little boy, we keep talking about internal self-government, internal self-government. And at least I'm heartened to see, and I must commend this committee for pushing what I'm seeing now, and I can assure you that you have my wholehearted support. Now, I did not have enough time to go through the document, but I had been following the debate on the media, etc. And one of my main concerns has to do with the question of security. Tobago is a developing country, and a developing island, sorry, as a part of Trinidad and Tobago. And yes, as I said, Tobago is developing, and with any country, any developing country, any improving country, there would be an increase in crime. Now, when we look at how police officers are allocated to Tobago, it is determined from Trinidad what kind of security arrangements Tobago will have. And I think that the Tobago House of Assembly need to have a say in what should happen in Tobago's security, in the formation of its police service, etc., selection of police officers. I see that the legislation talk about that is one of the areas that the THA will not touch, but I think that even though it remains with the central government, the THA should have a say as to who should be appointed, how many officers you would need, what type of security arrangements you would need for Tobago, etc. And this is my recommendation. Thank you very much.
Good evening to the head table, all protocol observed. My name is Conrad James. I am a Tobagonian from Scarborough. I'm now residing in Trinidad for the purpose of my completion of my education as a young senior citizen. Mr. It's good to be here, Mr. Chuban and everyone. I must say that the destiny of Tobago should be determined in the hands of God and the people of Tobago. I support self-government for Tobago. Additionally, I support the need for the island of Tobago to be, the Tobago House of Assembly to be vested with the power of homeland security. That is national security. The whole of national security should be vested in with the responsibility of Tobago. There is a frightening development taking place in this country today that Tobago, the island of Tobago, needs to be fully protected, its borders, its internal security, and all around the island. Crime is big business in this country. It's not only about blue-collar crime. There are serious white-collar crime. And in order for Tobago to deal with it effectively, they need to have national security be under Tobago. If Tobago fails to do so, we will be at our own peril. Alternatively, the House of Assembly could look at setting up almost immediately a national guard. That is a system where you harness the resources of ex-police, ex-soldiers, national security. You look at joint resources of the young persons and train into a national service that could protect our own internal arrangement, our land, sea, air, boundaries, etc., in order to detect the infractions of all crimes on the island. If we fail to do that, it means therefore that we are going to hurt our tourism and our vital revenue severely, because crime is on the increase all around the world. And we need to do something about it as the House of Assembly, as Tobagonians. We need to have a strategic partner in respect of it, partnership with other external agencies apart from the Trinidad Police Service. We need to look at having the United States law enforcement, some cooperation with it, Britain, Israel, to deal with issues in national security. I want to look at the issue of agriculture. I know the speakers talk about agriculture. The Tobago House of Assembly, in order to be self-sufficient, to feed Tobago and to export our resources, we need to look at seriously at the issue of agriculture, agro-industry where possible. Now, this is this is a very serious phenomenon in many first world countries. Brazil, China, Russia has gone into the concept today of urban agriculture. There are a number of lands in the urban region of Tobago, other parts that we could develop it further. We need to look at the situation with the finances. Tobago should be given in this new constitution the authority to borrow, invest, and all the other mechanisms that facilitate trade, development, and expansion of the island. We should be given the authority. Additionally, the issue of Tobago being a ward of Trinidad should come to a closure once and for all. Tobago has been recognized as an independent island in the past. Tobago has its own governor. It was a sovereign island. We need to maintain that island status. And it is important that during the debate on it, recommendations should be included to remove that from the law books in respect of it. One of the things that the Privy Council has recognized in many court judgments from the Privy Council is that where there are any legal issue that it has been recorded that people have objected. From the time Tobago was being deemed a ward of Trinidad, that has been objection up to today. So it is in fact established that Tobagonians then and now has objected to it. And my final thing is that the boundaries we need to, as I indicated earlier, we need to look at the boundaries of Tobago and look back from the period of time that Tobago was an island. The boundaries were established and it's a full status, so we need to pursue it. I am in full support of all the agreements, all the things in order to drive the process for Tobago as a self-governing status. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening to the head table. All protocol observed. I am Ashley Stewart from Mount Thomas, Tobago, who is now living in Trinidad. I would like to compliment the persons who are responsible for taking the initiative of bringing this matter to the people of Trinidad. And I sincerely hope this can be seen as a precedent that other bodies would follow in dealing with matters pertaining to the people. And also to make particular reference to and to support everything that has been said so far. Good night.
You know, I went outside and, you know, sometimes we get more talk outside than inside. And you get the impression that there's still that concern, that fear. This is not about secession. It is really, as I said, about Tobagonians recognizing that the sovereign democratic state must remain united, but that we must have self-determination within that construct. I also want to, just in response to Mr. Andrews, indicate, as Mr. Richards had said, that we know that some of these things cannot and will not be achieved overnight, and therefore the whole question of a transitioning, that is part of the process, and we are sufficiently aware that we would not rush the process and treat with something that does not have too much chance of success. And of course, the whole question of consultation, we will continue to have meaningful consultation with the people in Tobago and in Trinidad. And I want to recommend, and I'll be recommending to my colleagues, that after the wealth of information and the number of recommendations and the varied recommendations that have come to the table, I think we have to meet and determine how we go forward. And just on one practical note, I think somebody spoke about Tobago's ability to borrow. In fact, Tobago does have the ability to borrow both on the local market and on the regional and international market. Tobago's rating by Moody's is Baa1, which compares favorably to almost any country in the Caribbean, and therefore allows us that kind of flexibility. We have limited debt in Tobago, and I think that we will be able to go onto the financial market and borrow. So there should be no real concern over that. But I just want to say that we go back to Tobago heartened and strengthened by what we've got from our brothers and sisters in Trinidad. And as somebody said out there, as I say, you get to talk outside, this is one of the best decisions that this committee has made, and I agree with him, and I want to thank you all very much for proving yourselves right, and for proving us right, and for ensuring that we can feel going forward that we have the full support of brothers and sisters in Trinidad. Thank you all very much.
Now, our Constitution says in Section 1 that Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign democratic state. It goes in subsection 2 of Section 1 to say that that sovereign democratic state that is called the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago consists of the island of Tobago and the island of Trinidad. Forget the other dependencies and so on. But what happened after that is that the Constitution proceeded to prepare a structure and system of governance for Trinidad. And that is our problem. What we're seeking to do is to ensure, and the majority of you supported it, is to ensure now that Tobago should have a system where the people of Tobago determine what is best for them. That's all we do. Second, law. I don't worry about whether police will come or national security will come under the THA, because one of the things in self-government is that the assembly or the government of Tobago will have the authority to pass laws for the good governance of the island of Tobago. And we know that law is the tool for the implementation of public policy or government policy. Each cabinet makes a decision and there's no law. There is no law. They can't implement it. So once the assembly has power to make laws for the good governance of Tobago, the enforcers of that law must be the police. So it will automatically come. I don't spend time discussing that issue. So it will naturally follow. And finally, when you talk, and Mr. London said it, you know, when you go outside, you get more talk than inside. A lot of us are scared of politics. And we must not be afraid of politics. If we understand what politics is, we should not be afraid of it. We must get involved. Let me tell you what it is. Politics is public service. And it is the highest form of public service, like teaching, or policing, or nursing. So it has to be done. If the teachers are not there, you can't have education in the school. Teachers must be there, so it's public service. Now, politics, as I say, is the highest form. So it has to be performed like teaching. So if it has to be performed and good people are not there to perform it, and it has to be performed, bad people will perform it. And that's why we need, don't feel I'm looking at you and say you're a good That's why we need good people in our politics. If you have good people in our politics, you would not have some of the things that we are experiencing in the country today. So get involved in the politics of your country and fix the problem of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me thank you all and associate myself with the comments of Brother London, and to thank you all for coming. And let me just say, this conversation must continue with you in your workplaces, in the buses, in the communities, and in Trinidad and Tobago until this matter is settled. Thank you very much.